Hello, I'm Paul Beckwith, and this is my sidekick, Shackleton, who's a bit restless today, so just about rip my earpieces out. So I'm talking about the coronavirus. This is part 2 of a series of videos, so if you haven't watched they are sequential, so please watch the part 1 before you watch this one. But I'll get right back into where I left off. So just to recap, this is the crucial plot from China. So these are the diagnosed cases here over time. So 100 here, 400 there, and the lockdown occurred with this small number of diagnosed cases in Wuhan. Okay, or this is in Hubei province or region. Okay, so and then these are the diagnosed cases going up here, but China was extremely smart because what they did is they asked people, all of these people, so they make a new diagnosis. They asked these people when they first started getting sick, and they worked backwards to get an idea of the number of new cases that were occurring, and those new cases were here. So on this day here, when there are 100 cases in this region diagnosed, there was actually, by working backwards, they didn't know these true numbers at the time, there were more like 1,500 cases already, people positive. A couple of days later, when this number was up to 400 diagnosed, there was more like 2,500 true new cases. And then after the lockdown, these true new cases started to peak and have been and dropped off. Okay, whereas the diagnosed cases, the diagnosed cases just kept increasing and increasing and increasing, and then with a lag, they peaked and started to drop off. So this is crucial. This is a very important chart. The lockdown in the regions that happened, in this, Chinese regions except for Hubei, they all flattened out here. Okay, no exponential growth for these because of these drastic measures that China took. And this is necessary in all countries if they want to it's necessary in all countries to combat this thing. Okay? Each of these regions here had the potential to become exponential, but thanks to the measures happening just at the end of January, all of them stopped the virus before it could spread. Meanwhile, South Korea, Italy, and Iran had a full month to learn, but they didn't. They started the same exponential growth as Hubei and passed every Chinese region before the end of February. Okay, so Eastern countries. South Korea cases have exploded, but have you wondered why Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, Thailand, and Hong Kong haven't? Okay, so if you look at the total cases of coronavirus outside of China, you can see Japan here, you can see Hong Kong here, you can see Singapore, Thailand. Okay, they didn't explode in these countries. Okay, Taiwan didn't even make it to this graph because it didn't have the 50 case threshold. And these places, it's right next to being right next to China or close to China in Asia. Okay, all of these Eastern countries were hit by SARS in 2003. All of them learned from it. They learned how viral and lethal it could be, so they knew to take it seriously. That's why all their graphs, despite starting to grow much earlier, still don't look like exponentials. Okay, so far we have stories of coronavirus exploding, governments realizing the threat and containing them. For the rest of the countries, it's a completely different story. So South Korea is an outlier. The coronavirus was contained after the first 30 cases, but patient 31 was a super spreader, passed it to thousands of people. Because the virus spreads before people show symptoms, by the time the authorities realized the issue, it was out there. Now they're paying the consequences of that one instance. Okay? But we need to talk about Italy. Well, Italy passed it and Iran passed it. So there's a couple things here. You've already seen the growth in Western countries and how bad forecasts of just 1 week look like. Now imagine that containment doesn't happen like in Wuhan or the other Eastern countries. You get a colossal epidemic. So he looks at a couple other places like Washington State, the San Francisco Bay Area, Paris, and Madrid. Okay, so this is the Washington State cases and the death rate. The death rate was huge. Okay, Washington State is basically the U.S.'s Wuhan. The number of cases there is growing exponentially. It's, as of March 8th, it was currently 140. Now it's much higher. But the death rate went through the roof. At some point, the state had 3 cases and 1 death. Okay, now we know the death rate of the coronavirus is anything between 0.5% and 5%. How could it be 33% here? 1 person out of 3. Basically, the virus had been spreading undetected for weeks. It's not like there were only 3 cases. It's that the authorities only knew about 3, and 1 of them was dead, because the more serious the condition, the more likely someone is to be tested. So it's a bit like the orange and gray bars in China. They only knew about the orange bars, the official cases, and they looked good, just 3. But in reality, there were hundreds, maybe thousands of true cases already. So this is an issue. You only know the official cases, not the true ones. You need to know the true ones. So how can you estimate the true ones? Well, there's a couple ways, and there's this guy did models for both. First thing is through deaths. If you have deaths in the region, you can use that to guess the true number of current cases. We know how long it takes for 1 person to go from catching the virus to dying on average, 17.3 days. So the person who died on February 29th in Washington State probably got infected around February 12th, 17 days earlier. So then you know the mortality rate. If you use 1%, that means that around February 12th, there were already around 100 cases in the area. So 1%, 100, so 100 cases if the person caught it got infected on February 12th. There were probably 100 cases, and that's the 1% of that died. Okay, 17.3 days later on average. Now you can use the average doubling time for the virus. It's about 6.2 days, time it takes to double cases on average. So in 17 days, it took this 1 person to die. The cases had to multiply by about 8, which is 2 to the power of 17, the doubling period, 2 doubling, divide over to the power of 17 divided by 6, number of doubling periods. So 1 death today means 800 true cases today. Washington State has today 22 deaths. Multiplying by 800, you get about 16,000 true coronavirus cases today. That's as many as the official cases in Italy and Iran combined. Now, 19 of those deaths were from 1 cluster, so you might count those as 1 separate thing. So the total deaths in the state would be, say, 4. Updating the model, you still get 3,000 cases. So you know that between about 3,000 and 16,000 cases. And again, that's so you can calculate this sort of stuff. So the conclusion is that there are likely 1,100 cases in Washington State right now, as of the date when this article was written a few days ago. Okay, we don't know the number of true cases, but it's much higher than the official one. It's not in the hundreds, it's in the thousands, maybe more. Canadians take note, don't travel to the U.S. San Francisco Bay Area, it might be just as bad in Canada. Until March 8th, the Bay Area didn't have any death. Officially, there were 86 cases. So they created their own test kit, which turned out not to work. The country decided to create their own test kit instead of taking them from the UN, the working ones. So these are the number of tests carried out in different countries by March 3rd. So South Korea testing 2,138 tests per million citizens. U.S. is down here at number 1. Okay, this is the positive test rates. Turkey, with no cases, had 10 times the testing per inhabitant than the U.S. Okay, so if you do 8,000 tests, that means 4,000 people have been tested. I think you have to do the test double. So this is a coronavirus test performed per million people for different countries as of March 9th. Look, Bahrain, South Korea, the UK is here, but the US is way, way down here. Okay, way, 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 way down. Canada's not on here. Okay, so the ratio of South Korea has great data. By the time they had 86 cases, the percent of them from community spread was 86%. The coincidence that these numbers are the same. So then you can calculate the number of true cases. If the Bay Area has 86 cases today, it's more likely the true number is 600. So these are how you get the estimates. France claims 1,400 cases today and 30 deaths. Using these methods, you estimate the true number is between 24,000 and 140,000. Again, when this was written. Okay, so this is between one order, a factor of 10, and two orders, a factor of 100, greater than is officially reported. Don't believe me? He says, look at the Wuhan graph again, right here. Okay, if you stack up the orange bars, get the cumulative until January 22nd, you get 444 cases. Now add up all the gray bars, they add up to 12,000 cases. Okay, add up all the gray bars, 12,000 cases. If France thinks it has 1,400 cases, it might well have tens of thousands. Same thing in Paris. Okay, Spain has similar numbers to France. Both have 1,200 cases versus 1,400. Both have 30 deaths. So Spain probably has more than 20,000 true cases already. Between a factor of 10 and 100 times more than the official number. And if you say impossible, this can't be true, just think of this. With this number of cases, Wuhan was already in lockdown, starting at 400 cases. These places have 600. These places need to lock down. Okay? With the number of cases we see today in countries like the US, Spain, France, Iran, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, or Switzerland, Wuhan was already in lockdown. Think about that. If you think, well, Hubei is just one region, it has nearly 60 million people, bigger than Spain, about the size of France. Okay, so what will happen when these cases materialize? Well, coronavirus is already here, it's hidden, it's growing exponentially. What will happen in our countries when it hits? It's easy to know because we have several places where it's happening. The best examples are Hubei and Italy. So the World Health Organization quotes 3.4% as a fatality rate. That's the percentage of people who get the coronavirus and die. This number is out of context. So he explains here why. The fatality rate, deaths divided by, if you take fatality rate as deaths divided by the total number of cases, here's how it changed in these countries. So it's all down to this sort of level here. It depends on the country and the moment, right? Between 0.6% in South Korea and 4.4% in Iran. So what is it? Okay, the two ways you can calculate the fatality rate is deaths versus total cases and deaths over closed cases. The first one is likely to be an underestimate because lots of open cases can still end up in death. Okay. The second is an overestimate because it's likely that deaths are closed quicker than recoveries. So if you look at how both those numbers, the deaths over total cases and deaths over closed cases, if you look at how those numbers evolve over time, they'll converge to the same result, and then you can get a good number on the final fatality rate. So look at the data here. So this is fatality rates in Hubei region, China, deaths over closed cases dropping here, deaths over total cases here, converging to about 4.8%. Okay, so 4.8% for Hubei, but the rest of China, the number converges to about 0.9%. Okay, and the reason is that the hospital systems get overwhelmed here. The death is much higher. In these other regions, it wasn't overwhelmed, able to keep the death rate lower. This is Iran, these two numbers. This is Italy. These are the two numbers. So converging down to this, about 3.5%, 4% number. South Korea here. Okay, so here's the a couple of the things you need to know a little bit about now. The hospitals, and the two numbers are completely disconnected in South Korea. Okay, total cases is only deaths over total cases 0.6%, deaths over closed cases 48%. So we'll talk about that. Thanks for listening.